fire, storm, and water restoration specialists. Find out how they can help you by clicking their icon at DeWittDailyNews.com.
Netflix buffering, YouTube spinning, devices not connecting, Zoom calls dropping. It's frustrating. Let's end your frustration by signing up for fiber internet in Clinton. Click the Connexus icon at DeWittDailyNews.com.
Your friend in Central Illinois. WHOW.
Top of the morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host today, Seth Lawrence. The WHOW Morning Show streams to Facebook and YouTube, brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. My guest in studio today, Joe Witte, DeWitt County Board Chair, following up the Thursday night DeWitt County Board meeting. Good morning, Mr. Witte.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for coming out and talking with us. Always good to have you in. And I think the highlight of Thursday night's meeting, Mr. Witte, was some ordinance changes regarding renewable energy. Let's start there this morning. What was the county taking up last night?
So we've had ordinance changes. Obviously, we've been looking at them for a couple of years, especially with the state bill, the statute that came out a couple of years ago, kind of outlining some of the requirements for siting. Last night was something that was really just getting the wind ordinance, really the last of the changes that we've had on the docket. Getting that one finally before the board. It's been through the Regional Planning Commission, through the Zoning Board. We did solar earlier in the year. Actually, that was late last year. So this was just the final revisions for wind. We haven't touched wind since the state statute, and really, I think it was even before I was on the board that any other changes have been done. So this is getting some conditions, some clarification into the ordinance from lessons learned from prior years, and just making sure that any future applicants kind of knew what would be expected when they came to DeWitt County.
Well, let's get a little history here. Take us back to what the state has come in and basically mandated on counties. What are their mandates, and where is there wiggle room for the counties to have some say in this thing?
Yeah, so I think if you were to read the bill, it came out in late 2023, I think, House Bill 4412, I believe it was. The statute outlines requirements for both solar and wind. They outline the siting requirements, the construction requirements, and decommissioning, and basically outline, for example, noise levels. We can put conditions in our ordinance, but they can't be more stringent than what the state basically outlines. So, basically, if it comes down to any of those three areas, siting, construction, or decommissioning, the state statute has requirements outlined, and our ordinance cannot be more strict than that, or else it's considered invalid. It also says that if an application meets those requirements, the county shall approve an application. So
basically
our hands are somewhat tied, right?
Yeah,
but what does that leave us? Well, really, I think it's more operational. So think once the wind or solar farm is up and running, what types of requirements are you going to have? Curtailment, shadow flicker requirements are part of the siting, but is there some type of reporting mechanism or something like that? So, you're kind of limited to what you can have in your ordinance, and it can't be overly burdensome for the applicant either, right? It's there's some gray areas that make it difficult to know, okay, is this going to be too burdensome for an applicant? But that's where we get the state's attorney to weigh in as well, and and certainly when it goes through the 3-step process, RPC, the zoning board, and the county board, any interested parties can certainly weigh in and give their takes. So.
Okay, so now what have those three parties been taking up? Where has the focus been?
I think the history, I guess, goes back to, we had obviously a wind application several years back, the Alta Farms.
Mm-hmm.
And from that, there were several things that we noticed in the application or in the ordinance that probably could be cleaned up, some areas that were confusing. And so I think back, was it 2022 maybe, the Regional Planning Commission was working on an ordinance, and then the state came in with the House bill. So we paused it at that time, put in an ordinance that would comply with state statutes. And then this is the result of picking that back up later, right? Because we had to first comply with state statute and get that ordinance in place.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go back and take another pass at what are those areas where we can maybe what we had in the pipeline apply and get through the process. So
where'd you land on some of those?
So, we had a proposal to go from, it started at land use to kind of pick up where the previous Regional Planning Commission left off.
Mm-hmm.
It went to the Regional Planning Commission. Some of the areas of focus were really on the operational side of things. Cleaning up and clarifying curtailment requirements. There's been a lot of discussion on that over the last couple of years. Trying to think the reporting mechanisms, trying to make sure that we've got requirements and conditions, but no real good, strong enforcement mechanism, right? No clarity as to what reports are required and when. So we try to get some of that clarified in the ordinance. There's a noise study, as you're probably aware, that we had on Alta Farms.
Mm-hmm.
They completed that, but that was thrown on them, and it was never in our ordinance. That was a condition. So we wanted to get that in the ordinance so that an applicant would know, this is going to be expected, and here's, how we're going to outline that. So, I don't think there's anything really new per se. It's more getting the conditions that were, attached to the previous application, get the language cleaned up a little bit so it was stronger and more clear, and then make sure that those are in the ordinance so a future applicant would know what to expect.
Yeah. So again, Joe Witte, DeWitt County Board Chair, our guest in studio today, following up Thursday night's DeWitt County Land Use Committee meeting. And I know the one revision dealt with putting what's known as the LaSalle factors into the ordinance. And I had, forgive me, I had written a second story last night. I accidentally wrote two stories, which that's an interesting tale on its own. And I'm trying to remember what the first revision was. You guys took up two last night. One again was the LaSalle factors. Oh, it was curtailment. Curtailment was the other one, right?
So it was one ordinance.
Okay.
Okay. What happened was the Regional Planning Commission sent on their recommendation, which goes then into the zoning board for their hearing.
Okay.
And the Regional Planning Commission had the LaSalle factors included in their revision. Curtailment had some language in there that clarified one of the things that we've been discussing. Who requires this? Is there's an ordinance, or there's a agreement with the National Weather Service, and then there was a required curtailment based on the county, right?
Right.
Well, that went through the zoning board, and they had slightly different views, and some of those things were taken out.
I was going to say, didn't they both land in different places on a few of these?
And that's not unusual.
Okay.
That's what we want. We want different boards to look at things through a different lens, and we got both recommendations. I think the zoning board did a great job at looking at, what really needs to be in the ordinance and what could be attached as a condition. So their recommendation came with some of the areas that were recommended out of Regional Planning Commission removed for one reason or another. And so what we were looking at last night is, okay, we've got the zoning board appeal. We got their recommendation. They recommended to remove some sections. Last night's discussion was, okay, where do we really want this ordinance to end up? And we started with the zoning board. There was a few minor adjustments to some wording, some based on the state's attorney's recommendation on clarifying some things. But the LaSalle factors was one, right? The Regional Planning Commission recommendation had that in there. A lot of the other counties around us, they've included that in their ordinance after the state statute came out, because there was a lot of uncertainty. What is, for 50 years or 40 years, that's what guided your decision making.
Give us an overview of what the LaSalle factors are.
It's based on a Illinois Supreme Court case back in, I think it was 1978, if I saw your story correct, right? Where it's because there was no statute to guide some of those zoning decisions. Court stepped in on a case and kind of outlined some of the things that are good to consider. You're not harming your neighbors. There's six or so factors.
There's six of them,
outlined that should be considered in a zoning decision. And that's what special use applications have had to consider for the last 40-some years. And then the statute came out, and, you got 40 years of operating under those conditions. Do they apply anymore or not? And I think our state's attorney's recommendation was, well, now we've got a statute. And so, no, in this case, wind and solar, they don't.
And you seem to think so too.
I think the statute is pretty clear. I would love for it to mean that, we still can consider, does the application harm the people in the vicinity? Do we have the ability to consider that? I don't know that we do. But we'll cross that bridge when it comes. Whether those factors are in the ordinance or not, I guess it comes down to, does it harm us or does it help us? And
do you want to be the first to challenge the state on it?
No, see, that's the thing is I don't know that it helps us, but we just don't know. There's a lot of unknowns. So, it wasn't, I think all the board would, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think, those are things that we want to consider, right? We want to make sure that an application that comes in, even if it meets the state requirements, there's things that might need to be considered, and kind of feels like our hands are tied. So no, we don't like the fact that those LaSalle factors might be null and void, so to speak. But, unfortunately, that's what the statute seems to suggest. So I didn't see the value in adding those in at this time. A year ago, when there was still a lot of uncertainty, I was in favor of getting those, and we do have the LaSalle factors in our solar ordinance. Will they help us? I don't know. But, that's what the debate was last night. I don't think anybody is opposed to them. It's just, does it make sense to put them into the ordinance and potentially muddy the waters?
How about curtailment or the changes there?
Yeah, so curtailment, again, a lot of discussion on that over the last couple of years. That was a condition that was attached to the Alta Farms application. And what we found after the fact was there's a lot of confusion. Okay, who or when do they curtail? I thought the condition, the intent, it was pretty clear, but in practice, the wind farm got into an agreement with the National Weather Service, which was one of the conditions, but then kind of ignored, I felt, part of the condition from the Witte County standpoint that they had to curtail, regardless of whether the National Weather Service notified them. And there was a lot of discussion in the hearing. I think we spent a couple nights of testimony when that application went through the zoning board. So we were just trying to clarify what is the expectation there. And where we landed was, you should get into an agreement with the National Weather Service and they can request curtailment, but that's between the wind farm and the National Weather Service. There's also the requirement from the county to curtail, the expectation of curtailment when there is national weather events without being notified by the National Weather Service, with a phone call, because they have their hands tied during a severe weather event and they shouldn't have to be, calling, NL or whomever that future developer would be. And I do want to clarify, none of these ordinances will apply to NL. That, when they sent their application, they got approved. The ordinance that was in place at that time is what dictates their requirements. The ordinance change that was approved last night was really just for any future applicants. So this will not retroactively impact any other approved applications.
A couple of questions. Is there any potential applications for wind?
You never know, but we did get a letter from Wapella Bluffs LLC. I think they were originally part of the Alta Farms, maybe phase 2. They still retained a bunch of their leases, and they did send a letter weighing in on some of the proposed changes with some recommendations. Unfortunately, it came in a day before, so we've had this in the process for 2 years. It's been on the county board agenda now for some potential action for a couple months. And they came in, I think Wednesday, we got a letter with a couple of proposed revisions that are difficult to consider that late in the process. But I think based on what came out of ZBA, there shouldn't be much on that was approved that it can be concerning to them. What they were basically saying is, they're looking at potential development, whether or not, they don't have any solid plans, they don't have a timeline, but they were just offering some suggestions, to make things, they felt, be looking at things holistically from, the community side as well as from the wind developer side.
Gotcha. Sounds like still some issues with the Nell in there and their curtailment and all that.
Yeah, that's something that, we've got Elizabeth Weichel as our zoning administrator. She's our enforcement officer, and I think she'll have to investigate and determine if there was a violation.
Yeah. I know they had a big leadership group speak to you a little less than a year ago now, I guess. How are things going with communication on that side? I know they are based in Lincoln now. There's some local folks over there. How's all that going?
Well, unfortunately, I think a lot of the folks that came, Justin Trenery was the senior management that came and spoke with us. He's not on. I don't know if he's even with NL any longer. So there's been some turnover. I think we still have the same local gentleman. I don't recall his name, but I think the communication, we did get the final wind study in, but I don't know that we're going to get them in again in person as a group. If we did, it might be different folks anyway. So, it's just something that we'll have to continue to work.
Any regular communication with them?
Not with the board directly. I don't know if, Ms. Weichel in looking for
answers
on the curtailment and, obviously the wind studies, those are things that she's probably communicating with them, but regular communication with the board is kind of been non-existent. Well,
one last thing before we go to break. Do you worry about the state coming in with even more over-the-top regulation on wind and solar?
Do I worry about it? I mean, no, they can, but it's Illinois. You never know what they're going to do.
Nothing out of this legislative cycle that's of interest to you in that realm?
I'm trying to think that I know there's something on I think the taxation of solar, maybe even something for battery storage, but there's a lot of bills that get proposed that never make it out, and we'll see. Another one was as you're probably aware, the bill to protect the Muhammad Aquifer from CO2 sequestration. So there's a lot of things out there. We'll see what makes it through and adjust if needed. But
very good.
It's going to be continual. There's going to constantly be some discussion because of all the attention and visibility on these issues.
Sure. Joe Witte, DeWitt County Board Chair, our guest in studio, following up the Thursday night DeWitt County Board meeting. More to come with him on the morning show.
WHOW.
Let's check the opening numbers now at the Chicago Board of Trade on this Friday. Jim Taylor, RFD Radio Network. Corn and beans starting the day in the red. Wheat starting higher. July corn opening 458.5, down 4.5. September corn down 2 3/4, 438.25. December new crop 450.5, down 2 3/4. July beans opening 1058 3/4, down 8 3/4. August beans down 7.5, 1055, and November beans 1048 down 7 1/4. July Chicago wheat opening 547 1/4, up 2 3/4. September wheat up 2.5, 563. December wheat 585, up 1 3/4. July bean meal 296.20, down 230, and July bean oil 49.14, up 3 cents. Opening numbers on this Friday. Jim Taylor, RFD Radio Network.
Baum Chevrolet Buick offers full transportation options while giving you peace of mind. This is Scott Baum from Baum Chevrolet Buick here in Clinton and Farmer City. This is what we strive to do each and every day. We'll listen to you, give you the options for routine maintenance, major mechanical problems, or collision repairs with a staff that is knowledgeable to find the best option for you. Baum Chevrolet Buick, your full service dealer. See us at baumchevybuick.com right from the start.
If you've got allergies this season, we have relief. CEO Paul Scarron here from Warner Hospital and Health Services in Clinton. Come to our walk-in clinic inside our family medicine. No appointment, no problem. See our icon at DeWittDailyNews.com.
DeWittDailyNews.com is the area's leading local news source 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Get the latest local news, obituaries, police blotter, weather forecast, and more with no paywall. Head to DeWittDailyNews.com to get the local information you need to know.
Your friend in Central Illinois, WHOW.
Once again, a good morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host today, Seth Lawrence. The WHOW Morning Show streams to Facebook and YouTube, brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. Joe Witte, DeWitt County Board Chair, our guest in studio here for this morning, following up the Thursday night DeWitt County Board meeting. Mr. Witte, real fast, hit on the swearing in of a new board member last night. How about that?
Yeah, Timothy Earl works for Constellation Energy. He's in, I want to say it's Creek Township. He was recommended. We've been looking for a couple months now since Mr. Ferris stepped down to fill that spot. And I think Mr. Wirtz actually recommended him. And so he went through the process. I think the Republican committee had several members that interviewed him. I got to speak with him, and I know a couple other board members did as well. Seems like he's going to be a good fit. He's eager to step in and serve, and this would be filling the position until a special election could be held in early 2026. So, we're glad to get that filled and get District C represented again fully by three board members. We got him added to the couple of committees, the public safety and the property committees as well. So we are back at 12 members again, and got all of our committees fully staffed.
Sure. Well, about a minute left with you, Mr. Witte. What's coming up in June? Wow, I can't believe it. What's coming up in June for the county board and your committees? How about that?
So one other thing that we covered last night even was getting a couple of engineering agreements approved. We do anticipate we've got a couple of solar applications in the zoning office now. There's a couple of items that they still need to finalize, but we wanted to get the engineering agreements approved so that when they say, yep, we've got everything in, they say go, we've got 60 days to get a hearing started. And part of that is we need an engineering firm to kind of review the application, make sure everything's in good order. And so we want to get those approved. I think that's probably going to be hitting us here, maybe not in June, but I expect that we'll have one or both of those applications ready to go. And then that means we'll have to have a hearing turned around pretty quickly. So that's coming.
So solar development on the way.
Solar development. It's
all right.
Been in the works for some time. But
sure.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, Mr. Witte, I hate to do this to you, sir. I got to let you go for the day. Joe Witte, DeWitt County Board Chair, our guest in studio, following up the Thursday night DeWitt County Board meeting.
WHOW.
The Big 1520 WHOW Clinton 92.